America, really? You don't want that. Germany had it. Don't need to be repeated.
I'm just like freezing. I can't believe that that's really happening. I can't imagine what it's going to be like the next 4 years if this is just the beginning.
You just heard from two Germans in Berlin who were shown the video of Elon Musk sig-heiling behind a presidential podium, and as you saw, their reactions were very telling. See, in America, there's this manufactured debate about whether or not it was really a Nazi salute, but it's not debatable to people in Germany. They see what's happening in the United States, and they are encouraging us to pull our heads out of our asses if it's not already too late. And I want to show you some more reactions because somebody played the video for them, and you can see them actually gasp. They're shocked that this is happening in the United States, and they explain why they're so shocked.
He would be doing this in Germany. He would be arrested on the spot. I know some people might come with the excuse that he is autistic, and as someone who is autistic myself, this is not an excuse. I would never do this gesture.
We had this, and we don't need this. And now we have to do some things that this won't escalate.
I don't really follow up on the internal things that's going on in the US, but let me say it like this, I'm not surprised.
You and me both, brother. But to be clear, these random people on the street in Germany aren't the only ones sounding the alarm. In the German newspaper Die Zeit, one of the headlines translates to "A Hitler salute is a Hitler salute is a Hitler salute." And I think it speaks for itself. Now, I want to read you a little bit from that article. So Lenz Jacobson argues, the gesture speaks for itself. It's documented on video. Those who want to see something else in it, who don't want to see a Hitler salute, do so at their own risk. And what he said there is incredibly important. Because in America, even some liberals are saying, actually, I think that he was just doing it because he's awkward. And also I've seen people say that it was because he's autistic, which is extremely offensive to autistic people who don't sig-heil accidentally. I mean, who does that? Who says that? So it's weird that we're still playing this game when the fascists are in power. Like, I understand playing this game during an election because you don't want to ruffle any feathers, but Trump is in office right now, and we're still pretending like it's not what it looks like. Now, when it comes to Germans, so Germany's ambassador to the United States, he also shared some warnings about Trump in private. And what he says, I think, should be chilling to every single person. So this was a private document obtained by Reuters, and he basically is concerned that Trump is laying the groundwork right now to become an actual dictator. Reuters reports, quote, the briefing document dated January 14th and signed by Ambassador Andreas Michaelis describes Donald Trump's agenda for his second White House term as one of maximum disruption that will bring about a redefinition of the constitutional order, maximum concentration of power with the president at the expense of Congress and the federal states. Basic democratic principles and checks and balances will be largely undermined. The legislature, law enforcement, and media will be robbed of their independence and misused as a political arm. Big tech will be given co-governing power, it says. Now, it's especially important when outsiders say things like this, because if I say something like this, and I have said things like this, people can say, well, he's just trying to get clicks. If a politician says this, they'll be accused of just throwing red meat to their liberal base. But when somebody who's on the outside says something like this, because that's what he sees and he has nothing to gain, that's where I think the people who were doubting what we're seeing should think twice about doubting what they're seeing. They should believe their eyes. And we're already seeing what he's describing happen, right? There are reports that Facebook and now TikTok are censoring content at the behest of Donald Trump. The document also warns that we are going to see a sort of redefining of the First Amendment, not only through big tech, but in the form of lawsuits against anyone who challenges this administration, which is something that is already happening. And unfortunately, these companies are backing down. ABC settled their lawsuit with Donald Trump when they would win, but they just want to curry favor with this fascist administration. Now, in addition to this, so the Germany ambassador also points out the failure of institutions that are now also in Trump's pocket, one of them being the Supreme Court and another being the Department of Justice, which is going to give Trump carte blanche to go after his political opponents and crack down on dissidents or violently crush protests using the military, which, by the way, is something that the U.S. military is now concerned about. And Trump's defense secretary nominee, Pete Hegseth, dodged the question when he was asked about whether or not he would obey an order to deploy the military against U.S. citizens. And on top of that, Trump just pardoned 1,500 insurrectionists. I believe 600 or so of them were charged with violent crimes, but this is significant, not just because it's bad that we now know that there's no accountability for attempting a coup, but because these people can be potentially mobilized by Donald Trump as his own personal militia because he knows how loyal that they are to him, and he shored up their loyalty by pardoning them. One of them, by the way, was just arrested a day later for a gun charge. So what makes this moment particularly dangerous is the way that Trump has effectively bent every institution to his will. I mean, you see media companies complying with his authoritarianism, politicians in both parties falling in line. And during his last term, the Justice Department, which was an independent agency back then, defied Donald Trump when he tried to break laws or violate the Constitution. But this time, Trump is stripping autonomy away from those agencies in order to prevent the kind of defiance that he faced in his first term. And this concentration of power is exactly what the German ambassador is warning us all about. And it's also the crux of Project 2025, by the way, which has officially begun. And I say that because Trump reinstated Schedule F via executive order on his first day in office. Now, this reclassifies all federal employees as political appointees, which means that he's going to be able to fire them more easily and replace them with sycophants. And stacking agencies with loyalists is how he's going to be able to redefine the constitutional order in the way that that German ambassador is concerned about. And this executive order is the first step towards the full implementation of that goal and towards Project 2025. So, when he claimed on the campaign trail that he didn't know anything about Project 2025, this is confirmation that he was lying, obviously. Not only did he initiate Project 2025 on day one, he nominated the co-author of Project 2025, Russell Vought, to be the OMB director. So he is dismantling democratic institutions in an attempt to assume total control of government. And he is so brazen, he's literally trying to undo the 14th Amendment via an executive order. That is insane. Now, you probably know what I'm talking about, but I'm referring to his executive order to end birthright citizenship. You, in theory, can't do that because it's codified in the Constitution. So that usurps an executive order. But I mean, who's going to stop him? The Supreme Court? Just to demonstrate how absurd this is, because I think we give Trump a pass just because we're fatigued with all the bullshit that he throws at us. But imagine a Democrat won the presidency and then they tried to overturn the Second Amendment with an executive order. Do you think that Republicans would tolerate that? They would be screaming at the top of their lungs about how this president is a dictator. But since Trump is doing it, it's A-okay. But it shouldn't be lost on us that Trump seemingly doesn't think that the Constitution constrains him at all. That's what he's telling us with this executive order, and that should worry all of us. We already know that he has no regard for the Constitution. He called for it to be suspended. He also removed the Constitution from the White House website. They say it's going to come back, but I mean, it's kind of a bad sign that he took it down in the first place, and I guess was hoping nobody would notice. But I mean, nothing can stop him. Even the 22nd Amendment, which limits presidents to 2 terms. I mean, think about it. The Supreme Court has the authority to interpret the Constitution in any way they want. So all they have to do is interpret the 22nd Amendment to mean that a president can't serve 2 consecutive terms, and voila, he's now eligible to run again in 2028. The real question is, how far does Trump want to take all of this? Because unfortunately, it's all up to him, and we have no say in the matter. Neither Democrats nor Republicans are going to be able to stop him, and Republicans don't want to resist him. And even if Republicans do feel like he's usurping his power, they know resistance is futile. And I want to show you what I mean by that. So on day one, Trump signed an executive order designating Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations, which gives him the authority to literally invade Mexico. That's a big deal. Now, a Trump-supporting congressman talked about how excited he was about the prospect of invading Mexico, and even one Fox News host, one of their most conservative hosts, was genuinely stunned by what he was hearing. So pay close attention to Stuart Varney's face.
And I think not only, should we label them as terrorists, we need to go after them and destroy them. They've been killing tens of thousands of Americans every single year. I'm really glad that they're terrorists, been designated as a terrorist by the Trump administration. Now let's go after them and wipe them off the face of the earth.
What do you mean by that? Let's go after them, attack them inside Mexico. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look, I would give Mexico 2 weeks to do the job, and if they can't do the job, then we've got to do the job. We need to go get them, and we need to wipe them off the face of the earth.
I wonder if America is ready for that kind of, I'm going to call it radical change.
Well, listen, we went to war for 15 years when Al-Qaeda killed 3,000 Americans. These Mexican cartels are killing hundreds times more than that.
So that's where we're at. And Stuart Varney didn't even bother to push back that much because why bother? It doesn't matter. Trump is in his final form. He's leveled up to 99. His character is capped, and he's about to unleash a giant Kamehameha wave on the entire country, and there's nothing any of us can do to stop it. It's his world, and we're all just living in it. Mass deportations are set to begin next week, starting in Chicago. He's deploying 1,500 U.S. troops to the southern border, and we're already getting the sense that he thinks the solution to every problem, whether it's real or perceived, is a military response, like a true dictator. And it's clear that he's going to make everything a spectacle, a show of force. And maybe he doesn't become as powerful as Vladimir Putin or Viktor Orban. But one thing that we know is that by the time he's done and he chooses to leave the White House, our institutions are going to be completely hollowed out. The Treasury is going to be looted by him and his oligarch buddies. And it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. But he's not just consolidating power. He's not just preparing to enrich himself. Because remember, another hallmark of fascism is their demonization of marginalized groups. And, that's also what he's doing. After portraying them as the enemy on his campaign trail, he's officially trying to invisibilize marginalized people at the federal level by rolling back decades of progress. For example, he didn't just roll back DEI, which is how a lot of news organizations are reporting on this. He's legalizing discrimination, or at least he's trying to. And I say that because, as the HuffPost reports, Trump rescinded an executive order signed by LBJ during the civil rights era back in 1965. This executive order prohibits federal contractors from discrimination on the basis of race, religion, sexual orientation, sex, gender identity, so on and so forth. And Trump did this under the pretense of killing DEI, but in actuality, it opens the door to discrimination. In fact, GOP operative Christopher Rufo tweeted that cabinet teams are making lists of, quote, DEI employees who will be shortly getting pink slipped. But as Evan points out here, who shared this screenshot, they're just going to fire people for not being cis or straight or white. And I say this because Trump already shut down governmental DEI programs, and all of those people have already been gone. They're on hold, right? At a minimum. So the remaining people who are there that they deem as DEI aren't technically part of any existing DEI programs because Trump got rid of those. So what that means is that they're obviously now using DEI as a synonym for the remaining minorities. So discrimination is back in a big way. And the silver lining is that we still have the Civil Rights Act for now, assuming the Supreme Court doesn't accept a challenge to that too and overturn it. But at least we still have that. But this is going to open the door to discrimination that we created remedies for during the civil rights era. I mean, let that sink in. But I mean, the Supreme Court already greenlit discrimination in the private sector against LGBTQ people in their 303 creative case. And Trump is now just trying to expand discrimination and who can be discriminated against. But just, again, stop for a moment and try to comprehend how bad this is. He's dismantling protections for people of color put in place during the civil rights era. This was not controversial until recently. I mean, it was controversial after it passed, but I mean, a lot of society had come to realize that these protections were good. They were seen as achievements, but now Trump's trying to do away with them. But this is just the beginning. Public enemy number one, of course, has been LGBTQ plus people, namely trans people, and Trump's attempt to erase them has already begun on day one of his administration. For example, he purged any mention of LGBTQ plus people from federal websites and removed resources regarding HIV. He also banned pride flags, as well as Black Lives Matter flags, by the way, from being flown at U.S. embassies. And more importantly, he signed an executive order eliminating the federal government's recognition of trans and non-binary Americans. And he laid the groundwork to turn away trans rape victims from women's shelters. And he's doing this attack on trans people under the pretense of protecting women, which is especially gross. Now, I want to play a clip from Democracy Now! This is ACLU attorney Chase Strangio, who's going to explain the implications of some of these changes in his executive order that he signed.
Yeah, so there are many, many instructions in this one executive order, including this directive to HUD to issue proposed regulations to, in essence, exclude trans people from various forms of shelter system under the auspices that a trans person is an inherent threat to non-transgender women. Obviously, that just enhances the risk that transgender people face in society if we are deemed as a threat to others simply by existing. And the order also includes directions to, for example, the Secretary of State and Department of Homeland Security to possibly revoke the passports of transgender people because those passports do not reflect this quote unquote biological reality that sex is only binary at the time of conception.
Let me ask you about the executive order also requiring all government-issued identification documents, including passports, visas, and global entry cards, to be biological classification as either male or female. The significance of this, Chase?
I mean, it's hugely significant. Already last night, we saw from the Department of State's website the possibility to update your gender marker on passports has already come down. We know that people rely on accurate identification to move freely through the country and around the world. This will put trans people at risk of violence. It means every time you have an encounter with the government, the likelihood that you will be outed is significantly increased. And then with that outing comes the risk of discrimination, harassment, and potentially violence. So trans people are bracing themselves for a lot of negative outcomes here, not just symbolic, but really material ones.
People are scared, and rightfully so. In fact, the Trevor Project reported a 33% spike in calls to their crisis hotline for LGBTQ plus youth on the day of the inauguration. And just in case you were curious, calls jumped by 700% the day after the election. So as you can see, people are definitely worried. Trump's second term isn't just affecting them politically, it's affecting them personally in a profound way, especially LGBTQ plus youth who are the most vulnerable. But there is two small things that the rest of us can do to help. First, we can all just be an ear to a trans person, whether it's online or in person. Reaffirm them, listen to them, let them know that you care about them. Second, do your best materially to assist them through mutual aid if it's needed, or signal boost their mutual aid requests. Trans people are going to be the most protected in blue states, and a lot of trans people in red states right now are trying to relocate. So if you have a bedroom to spare for a trans person to help them start a new life in a blue state, or if you have a couple of bucks to spare for the GoFundMe of a trans person trying to relocate, I would encourage you to consider sending a couple of bucks their way. Now, I have two trans friends myself currently trying to get out of Texas. One of them is Mari, who I've known for around 8 years. She's an amazing human being who has had an ongoing GoFundMe for more than 6 years for gender-affirming healthcare, but she's since had to shift the focus of that to fundraising for relocation to a blue state. Now, the second one that I want to show you is from Ash. I actually shared a different fundraiser for her before when she was trying to get out of Florida around the time that they banned gender-affirming healthcare for adults. She unfortunately went to Texas. That was the only place that she could go, just temporarily, but now she's looking for a long-term solution, and she's trying to relocate to a blue state permanently. I'll link to both of those down below. Also, if you know a trans person with a GoFundMe, or if you're a trans person with a GoFundMe yourself, please link to it down below in the comment section. I don't know for sure if you'll be able to post the link itself. YouTube might block that, but at least share your name and let us know how to search for it online. But just understand, even if you're lucky enough to get out of a red state, this is very difficult, right? Mari has to leave behind her parents. Ash has moved multiple times now just to be able to live. We're talking about American refugees from red states. That's how bleak it is. American refugees. But to be clear, this attack on queer people, it started even before Trump took office. Ohio Republicans, for example, are reportedly looking to challenge Obergefell v. Hodges in order to overturn gay marriage rights. And I suspect that they're also going to want to challenge the Respect for Marriage Act at the Supreme Court as well. And not to mention, the Supreme Court will be hearing an upcoming case on whether or not LGBTQ inclusive education violates religious liberty. So I'm sure that's going to go well. So there's a lot. There's so much. And as I talk about all of these issues, understand I am barely scratching the surface. Even as I talked about that civil rights executive order, there's more within that executive order. There's so much, it's overwhelming. And that's kind of what Trump wants to do. It's a blast so that way you miss some of these things. So You'll all have to do your due diligence. I'm trying my very best, but prepare yourself mentally for what's to come and know that you don't have to experience it alone. It's going to be a fucked up time, but others feel the same way, and they're also in the same predicament. So I would encourage you all to reach out to one another, talk to each other, and understand that everyone in some way is going to be negatively affected by Trump's second term. Things that were bad are probably going to get worse, if I'm being honest, and the politicians who were supposed to be protecting us, they're already collaborating with fascists. I mean, we talked about how 12 Senate Democrats recently voted with Republicans for the Lake and Riley Act, which would deny due process to immigrants. And then there was 30 or 40 some odd House Democrats that voted for it as well. John Fetterman took to Twitter to celebrate Trump's decision to lift the prohibition on 2,000-pound bombs to Israel as they're doing a genocide that's temporarily paused. This is startling because that was a bridge too far even for Biden, but nonetheless, we have a Democrat supporting what will inevitably be a U.S. president's complicity with war crimes. I mean, opposition to Trump has completely collapsed, aside from the occasional denunciation or finger wagging from Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer. So it's more important now than ever to rely on each other for support. And if you're not part of a marginalized community, understand that you're targeted to in some way. Even if you voted for Donald Trump, you will not be protected from his wrath. And I need you to understand that there are so many things that he's doing now that will affect us down the line in the way that Reagan did, that we're not going to understand the full consequences of his actions until decades later, perhaps. He did withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord again, and that's probably not going to be great for climate change. Not that we were making much progress, not that that was sufficient, but like any little step we can do to mitigate it, that's kind of important now, given how bad it's gotten. He also rescinded a Biden-era executive order that would potentially lower the cost of prescription drugs. This doesn't refer to the insulin cap, by the way, but nonetheless, it's a small thing that he did that he didn't have to do just to fuck people over. He also withdrew from the World Health Organization, and he's reportedly ordered a communication blackout at federal health agencies. According to Unusual Whales, they're saying that this is what the WAPO is reporting. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that we don't have a public health emergency or another pandemic during these next couple of years, because if that happens, we are all up shit creek without a paddle. So now is the time to come together and have real class solidarity, because all of us will be negatively affected by this administration in some way, shape, or form. And even though there's little we can do about it, there are things that we can do to survive, right? We can reach out to each other. We can have each other's back. If we see ICE, we don't tell them about our immigrant neighbor. You can warn your immigrant neighbors that they're there. If you see a request for mutual aid, at a minimum, try to share that. And if somebody needs an ear or a shoulder to cry on, you can be that person. Like, these little gestures aren't going to change the outcome. It's not going to amount to that much, but it's a little thing that you can do to make surviving just a little bit easier for everyone else.
Do yourself a favor and click the join button on YouTube to become a member, because Mike's doing a great job. Getting to watch his videos before everyone else is tremendous. Many people are saying this. Join today, folks. You won't regret it.